As artists and creators, we are always growing and transcending beyond what we once considered to be our final transformation. And once transcended, we look back in disgust at what we once called worthy, wiping metaphorical vomit from our lips and locking away the past so that it can no longer hurt anyone. But sometimes we don't lock that past away. Sometimes we let it linger, let it be, to remind ourselves that we have grown and that we are constantly moving forward. In my case, I often leave reminders of my past as placeholders until I can make something better to put there instead. Motivation to continue working hard and improving towards goals that will help me accomplish my dreams. Since I have failed to complete the call to action contest, I shall now share a piece of my past with you. A piece I was hoping I'd finally be rid of, and that no one would ever see again. Before we get started, it would be great if you could like this video and share it with some of your art friends. If you like art-related videos and tutorials, don't be afraid to subscribe either. I'm hoping together we can build an art community that promotes growth for beginners and intermediate artists, so we can help each other transcend and reach greatness. Now, on to the video. It was the year 2019. I had decided to make a comic in 100 days, where I have 100 days to put together a reasonably sized comic, which for me was one webtoon episode, but more specifically anything I could get done in that amount of time. At the time I decided to do this, I was working 2 jobs and going to school. Even when I was home, I usually had homework to do. There wasn't much time for me to seriously put together a webtoon, and yet, there I was, determined to do so. I forgot what at the time made me want to make one, and honestly I don't remember much about what was going on when I put it together. What I do know is that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. The story I had begun to develop was called Jikangiri, aka Time's Up, an unnecessary Japanese name because I wanted to make it seem more like a manga. The main characters in the world were forced to be part of a competition where they would have to fight a random opponent until one could no longer fight. In many cases, this meant killing them. The fights were managed by watches that they were forced to wear in order to manage them as fighters. If they tried to remove the watch, a lethal poison would be injected into their system, killing them. But win enough fights and the watch will remove itself. Lose enough fights and you will be executed via poison. Fights can take place anywhere and at any time during the normal lives of our characters, making it difficult for them to keep it secret from those they hold close. Of course, there's a ton more, but this is the basic summary, and I tell you all this now because I failed to make any of this known in the comic that I released in 2019. In fact, all I managed to do was write a ton of exposition and abuse the hell out of the glow layer, things that I was completely blind to at the time. But while the webtoon episode was not very good, it was still a stone of mine that needed to be stepped on. Let's break down some of the pitfalls of this episode so that you may avoid them when putting together your own webtoon. I'm going to try not to critique too much of the drawing stuff. Of course, there are a ton of issues in the visual and technical skills department, but this video is more webcomic specific, which focuses on things like composition, paneling, story, and so on. Now, right off the bat, the episode was posted by itself, and has been by itself for years now. A common and well-known tip with making a webtoon or webcomic is to post at least 3 episodes together in the beginning. This way, the reader has more time to get hooked and can make a decision on whether or not to subscribe. Webtoon specifically asks the reader if they wish to subscribe after they read 3 episodes. In addition to being posted alone, the episode does not stand on its own as a completed episode. Even in this format, each episode should have a beginning, middle, and end when telling a story, even if it's something small like a trip to a cafe. The entire episode is just the beginning. The main character finishes one random thing and starts another random thing without any context, but nothing is actually done to push the story forward or to establish the story in general, which is boring, especially for an action comic. Because of this stale beginning, the story, or lack of, fails to set the tone for what the reader should expect moving forward. Sure, the reader is left with questions at the end of the episode, but those questions are most likely, what is going on, and do I even want to keep reading this? With all that being said, there isn't even a hook. Nothing happens in this episode that would even grab the attention of the reader. Nothing that makes them like the main character, nothing that invites them into the world. It's just random actions and exposition. Now, I blame a lot of these issues on the fact that I failed to actually write a script. Instead, I jumped right into storyboards and wrote dialogue as I went. Not to mention, I rarely revised anything. I have no idea what was going through my mind, to be honest, but let's move on. I wanted to add that the comic failed to establish anything about the world my character was in, which could have easily been done with better shots of the city and by adding more population in the background. I understand that past me wasn't skilled enough to do much in those departments or even skilled enough to draw necks, but this is about avoiding those pitfalls. All the shots used are devoid of life and variety, so that you can barely tell that the main character travels from what's supposed to be a wealthy area of the city to what is supposed to be the abandoned slums. This transition was supposed to pack a punch when aligned with the narration, and was supposed to raise questions about what was going on. But with all the backgrounds basically being the same and all the camera angles actually being the same, none of that energy is established. Now, I continue to draw more pages for episodes 2 and even episodes 3. Pages that no one has actually seen but me. But I'll share a few of them with you all now. They aren't much better than episode 1, but who knows what could have happened if I continued to work on them. As I slowly pieced together these pages, it became more and more clear that it wasn't working. Not just the story, but my schedule. It took me 100 days to produce that singular episode, and that's how it turned out. I still wasn't writing a script, and I still had 2 jobs and school. It clearly wasn't the time for all my dreams to come true. So I dropped it and moved on, focusing on the more immediate things in my life. Of course, I've revisited the story a few times, and even started some actual script writing. One day, I will sit down and put together a complete story for it, but it is something that would take a long time to complete. So for now, I am focusing on smaller projects to develop my skill and to get some other story ideas down on paper. Without a doubt, I am a lot more capable than I was back then, even if I have tons more to learn. Seeing how much I've grown from then is a nice feeling. Sure, I look back at it now and think it looks terrible, but at the time I made it, that was me doing my best with the time I had. That person I was may not have been as good at art as I am now, but he had the same drive and the same passion, despite not even knowing what he didn't know. And if he didn't work so hard, then I wouldn't even be here. Now, let's recap some of the pitfalls of my first webtoon. It failed to establish the tone of the story. Nothing happens to hook the reader. The backgrounds lack any life, making the world seem plain and boring. The necks are poorly drawn. Nothing happens to make the reader like the main character. Nothing happens to progress the plot, thus it is boring. The plot isn't even established, thus the reader has no idea what they are reading, and the episode was posted alone, not giving the reader enough to decide whether or not they should subscribe. One more thing before I go. A lot of people will say that the art level doesn't matter when you start a webcomic. What really matters is the story, and this is true for the most part. The art doesn't have to be out of this world if the story is so engaging and the characters are well written. But this does not change the fact that comic style storytelling is heavily reliant on visuals. Tell a professional comic artist that the drawing skill doesn't matter and you might just offend them. The thing is that the first thing people will see and will engage with long before they can dive into the story will be the art. In most cases, there is a particular level of fundamentals and believability that has to be applied to the art in order to engage the audience, especially in a competitive visual market like Webtoon. People like to use One Punch Man as an example of the story mattering more than the art, but even with its success as is, the art was updated and made more professional in order to reach an even bigger audience. I understand the idea that comes from not worrying about how good the art is, and just diving in head first so that you can have a finished project. But like many things, this method does not work for everyone. I've seen too often people diving in headfirst to build a webtoon and then getting discouraged and giving up when they see they are not attracting as many followers as they thought they would. They end up giving up, and instead of working to get better at art or storytelling, they blame the algorithm or discourage others because if they weren't able to make it, then no one else will be able to either. Now, if you are making the webcomic just for yourself so you can have something finished, then don't worry about the art, or if anyone comes to read it. But if you want readers, then look at what they are reading and either match that or surpass it. In short, do not start a comic with the idea that the story will carry the load of attracting viewers, especially if there is no army of fans gathered around behind you telling you how great your story is. Instead, go in always looking for ways to improve both the visuals and the story instead of waiting for it to happen over time as you draw. If you want to make something that is story heavy and not art heavy, then you can simply write a novel. There is more than one way to tell a story. Just know if you are going to choose a visual medium to tell that story, then it probably makes sense to have good visuals. Personally, I don't think that there's anything wrong with waiting for your art fundamentals to be a bit better before starting to draw out your comic. You can even use that time to develop the story. Just make sure that you are not leaving anything up to fate, because more often than not, you will not get the results you wanted. Anyway, that's all for this video, and I hope it was helpful to at least one of you out there. If not, let us know in the comments what could be done better. And if you know of other ways we can level up our art skills, then let us know that as well. Also, while you're down there, I would love it if you would subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can see what I do next. But until we meet again, I would just like to say, welcome to Edenwick.